But we've been hearing it and reading it for months now. U.S. President Donald Trump repeatedly saying Canada should become the 51st state, and that's put some Canadians on edge. A lot of people in Canada are liking becoming our beautiful, cherished 51st state. They'll have to pay much lower taxes. They'll have the ultimate security. Most people believe that the U.S. could effortlessly take over Canada if it wanted to. After all, it has the world's most powerful military at 1.1 million active duty personnel, a population that is 750% larger, and an economy nearly 10 times that of its northern neighbor. And believe it or not, the United States has attempted to invade Canada several times in the past, with each effort ending in failure. But why is this different from other countries taking land? China claiming Taiwan, Russia taking Crimea. If powerful nations can expand their borders, why hasn't the U.S. taken Canada, and what's stopping them? The answer is far more complicated than you may think. Let's break it down. Despite what Trump believes, the U.S. can't straight up annex Canada. And let's face it, neither country really wants that. In a 2025 survey, 80% of respondents said that they would never vote for Canada to become part of the United States. However, 22% said that if Quebec or Alberta chose to be independent through a referendum, they would vote for their province to become part of the United States. And 30% said that if the United States offered all Canadians full U.S. citizenship and full conversion of the Canadian dollar, and all personal financial assets into U.S. dollars, they would vote for Canada to become part of the United States. Where the concern comes for many Canadians is the question of, could America take over if they chose to? And if they did, what would this look like? Trump came out hot as soon as he entered the office this year. He cracked down on illegal immigration, said he wants to acquire Greenland and the Panama Canal, and placed tariffs on major trade partners like China and Canada. Already there's been some retaliation, particularly from Canada, who have unveiled tariffs on their $107 billion of U.S. imports, starting with $21 billion of imports immediately. To many, this seems like the start of a deepening conflict between the two nations. If this is the case, could this mean a takeover is more likely? Most Canadians know that any talk of annexation is most likely unrealistic. Canada is a sovereign nation with its own government, laws, and distinct national identity, unlike Germany's annexation of Austria in 1938, known as the Anschluss. Characterized by a campaign in which Nazi Germany, under Adolf Hitler, sought to unify all German-speaking people under one regime, exploiting cultural and linguistic ties to support their expansionist agenda. As political pressure mounted, the German government fostered pro-Nazi sentiments within Austria, paving the way for a so-called vote that allowed for annexation, largely coerced through the threat of military force. However, the situation in North America differs significantly. There has never been a similar movement in the U.S. aimed at absorbing Canada through coercion or intimidation. Canada and the United States are distinct nations with their own unique identities, histories, and governance structures. Unlike Austria's relative cultural resemblance to Germany, the diverse components of Canadian society and its separate national identity underscore the unlikeliness of any similar annexation efforts by the U.S. Any attempt by the United States, or any other country, to annex Canada would breach international law, including the UN Charter, which safeguards the territorial integrity of sovereign nations. Canada has been a self-governing dominion since 1867 and gradually gained complete independence from British control through various legal steps in the 20th century. So after all of that work, to put it bluntly, this country of over 40 million people wouldn't go down without a fight. And to understand this a little better, it's worth tracing back through the past. Since the War of 1812, no nation has successfully invaded Canada. The country fought for its independence during this war, but did not attain full sovereignty until 1982, following a long path towards self-governance that began with Confederation in 1867 and was solidified by the Statute of Westminster in 1931, which granted greater legal autonomy. Although the land has been inhabited for thousands of years, with indigenous peoples establishing cultures long before European arrival, the journey to nationhood took over 4 centuries. From European exploration in the 16th century to the establishment of Canada as an independent nation. Despite this, it's pretty clear that President Trump believes almost nothing is out of his reach. There's no doubt his plans are ambitious. While many call them delusional, others argue that he has what it takes to achieve them. I mean, he's already proved that some of his ideas were far more than just ideas. So, why has he not made a move on Canada yet? Part of this reason comes from the intertwined past of the two countries. The United States and Canada have long been recognized as two powerful nations that, despite their distinct identities, work collaboratively across various domains, culturally, politically, and economically. This connection is reflected in the millions of dual citizens and the many families that line the border. Both countries fall into the 49% of nations in the world that allow dual citizenship. They cooperate closely on global security issues, including in Europe through NATO. They also maintain a maritime presence and uphold sanctions in the Indo-Pacific region, as well as conduct illicit trafficking operations in the Caribbean Sea and Eastern Pacific Ocean. So the idea of the U.S. attempting to annex Canada is kind of like attacking a next-door neighbor who is also a cousin and a close friend. Another thing to point out is the fact that many countries would likely not allow this to happen. Strong cultural and economic ties between the two nations aside, Canada's status as a member of the Commonwealth and its historical connections with countries like the UK, France, Australia, and Wales mean that these nations, which share a commitment to democratic values and the principles of sovereignty, would likely oppose any aggressive moves toward annexation. In fact, Stéphane Dion, Canada's ambassador to France, has recently expressed his disdain for Trump's plans, saying he's against his threat to take over Greenland. He said, "In order to respect international law, you don't threaten your neighbors by invasion." Canada's geography also presents significant hurdles that could deter any thought of annexation by the United States, or any other country really. Sharing the world's longest international border, spanning 5,525 miles with 120 land ports of entry, the bilateral relationship between the U.S. and Canada is one of the closest and most extensive globally, facilitated by a remarkable daily trade of approximately $2.6 billion in goods and services. Disrupting this relationship would be relatively unwise for the U.S., as both countries benefit immensely from their interconnected economies and shared values. That being said, the stable, recognized borders of the U.S. and Canada also make annexation somewhat unnecessary, unlike how some of the long-standing territorial disputes in Israel and Palestine are caused by unresolved borders. Furthermore, Canada's geography adds complexity to any potential invasion. It has one of the longest coastlines on Earth, much of which is rugged and difficult to access. The mountainous terrain and forests that cover much of the country would make any military incursion not only logistically challenging, but also strategically impractical. Another factor that contributes to the improbability of any nation, or specifically the U.S. attempting to annex Canada, is that it simply isn't seen as a highly sought-after territory. While Canada is indeed blessed with many natural resources, including oil, lumber, minerals, and fresh water, the strategic value of these resources must be weighed against the challenges of governing and integrating such a large, diverse, and geographically complex nation. The cost of taking over would far outweigh the benefits of acquiring some lumber or fossil fuel reserves. Canada's political system, integrated economy, and strong social sense of community mean that any attempt to take control of the country would spark massive public opposition, draw international criticism, and further escalate tensions. Countries seeking resource access often find more advantageous partnerships or trade agreements rather than through military means. As a result, the idea of conquest for resources loses its appeal when weighed against the complex realities of Canada's geography, governance, and its firm ties to global allies, making outright annexation a far-fetched proposition. So if the U.S. and Canada supposedly have such a respect for each other, why is Trump throwing out potential plans to take over? Surely this is rather counterproductive. This threat could easily start to change the average Canadian's perception of their neighbors. And the truth is, this has already started to happen. As you may know, some provincial politicians have been launching buy local campaigns to encourage Canadians to spend their money at home instead of the U.S. Some Canadians have gone as far as canceling trips to south of the border in protest. Canada is the top source of international visitors to the United States, with 20.4 million visitors in 2024, generating $20.5 billion in spending and supporting 140,000 American jobs. In February 2025, Visual Capitalists set out to find out what Canadians think of Trump and his desire to make Canada the 51st state. For this survey, a sample of 1,000 Canadians aged 18 plus were interviewed online. The poll showed that the majority of Canadians are against the idea, with over 70% saying they would never vote for Canada to become part of the U.S. However, younger generations have appeared more open to the idea. 43% of Canadians aged 18 to 34 would vote to join the U.S. if citizenship and asset conversion were guaranteed, compared to only 17% of those 55 and older. But the question is, do people actually think Trump can achieve his huge goal? America can't invade Canada. Trump can't conquer Canada. America is not in a position to conquer anyone. Although Canada's outgoing Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, has stated that he believes President Trump might be serious about annexing Canada because he wants to access the country's critical minerals, many people argue that the U.S. is far from capable of doing so. The first step probably would not be disbanding the CIA. And that's what he's done, right? So he's actually weakened American power in a very pronounced way exactly at the time as he's making all these remarks. In January 2025, Stephen March of Maclean's stated that Donald Trump's nonsensical threats are an attempt to distract from his own country's self-destruction. He said that Canadians need to get used to this kind of terrifying nonsense, and stated that there's going to be a lot more of this Pirate King blather over the next 4 years. However, he added that Trump's fantasies of annexation and conquest are nothing more than that, saying that at this point in its history, America has come off of 70 years of failed imperialist adventures, in which it discovered it couldn't hold on to Afghanistan or Iraq or Vietnam or anywhere else. He also claimed that America's military position in the world is shrinking rather than expanding. This comes from the fact that in recent years, several West African nations have seen a shift in their foreign military partnerships, with an increasing number of countries opting to reduce or expel American forces while looking toward Russia for support. Although still very strong, if the U.S. doesn't have the military might that Trump thinks it has, how exactly does he plan on gaining control of Canada? During a news conference at Mar-a-Lago on January 7, 2025, Trump rejected the idea of using military force to annex Canada and instead suggested using economic force to pressure Canada into joining. He maintained that the merger would save U.S. border security costs while improving national security. He also spread the word that this would be a great deal for U.S. citizens as well. Speaking to reporters on Air Force One on Sunday, Trump claimed, "We would be paying less than half in taxes if Canada joined the U.S. Trump also claims the U.S. loses $200 billion a year to Canada. So while the idea of the United States annexing Canada might spark interest or debate among some, including political figures like Trump who promote the idea of greater North American unity, the reality is far more complex. The cultural differences, varied political systems, and national identities of the two countries create significant barriers to such a huge shift. To that, national identity and self-governance are very important in today's political landscape, making annexation even less likely. Ultimately, the complexities of domestic policy, international relations, and public sentiment in both countries suggest that rather than seeking annexation, a more viable path forward lies in continued cooperation between the U.S. and Canada. However, Trump has 4 more years to further set things in motion and potentially carry out his threats, which leads many Canadians to feel uneasy about their future. What about the worst places to live in Canada?